Led was expelled from the hero's party due to his lack of strength and had to retire early in a border town. However, he was actually a versatile support, excelling in everything except combat. One day, the sage Ares threw a broken sword at Led and ordered him to attack, but Led couldn't even break the most basic protective shield, further proving he was useless in the party and dragging down the hero's sister. In this world, people are born with blessings, which grant them corresponding skills. Led's blessing was that of a guide, whose mission was to protect the hero's journey, giving him the innate strength of a royal guard. However, the hero and others had now surpassed Led, making him a burden. Ares scolded Led, even involving his sister Rudy. To avoid being a burden to his sister, Led finally agreed to leave, stating he would investigate the demon army alone and never return. What he never expected was that Ares, disregarding their past camaraderie, even tried to take away Led's equipment. So Led arrived at the border town of Zoltan. His dream was to open a pharmacy and live a leisurely life. Although he was despised by his teammates in the original team, among ordinary people, he was still considered top tier. Led demonstrated his guide skills and was no longer seen as useless. He possessed survival skills and the ability to identify herbs. However, while searching for herbs, an owlbear suddenly attacked. Led jumped onto a tree, ready to deal with it, but then remembered he was no longer part of the hero's party. He gave up the attack and returned to the village with the herbs. At the village entrance, Led encountered an adventurer party who were about to head into the forest to hunt the owlbear, and hoped Led could guide them. However, the leader Albert was rude, so Led refused outright. Then, Led's friend Gonza's nephew suddenly fell ill, and without timely treatment, he would go blind. Led happened to be missing one of the required herbs. Gonz knelt and begged Led for help. Led told him he would help as a friend, but asked him to keep it secret from the guild. Then, Led rushed into the mountains, only to find the adventurer party had set the forest on fire, nearly burning all the needed herbs. Led had to gather the herbs quickly, but unexpectedly, he encountered the owlbear again. With time running out, Led swiftly defeated it, only for the adventurer party to reap the benefits. After collecting the herbs in time, Gonza's nephew recovered quickly. That night, Gonza came to ask Led about payment. Led dreamed of opening a pharmacy, but had never done so due to lack of money. Fortunately, Gonza was a carpenter, so Led had him build a pharmacy for him. During this time, Led gained a good reputation in the Adventurers Guild for his excellent herb-gathering skills and friendly attitude, which piqued the interest of a blonde-haired girl. After Led's pharmacy was fully renovated, he invited neighbors and adventurers to a celebration. Hearing everyone discuss how the hero's party had defeated the demon army again, Led felt relieved, knowing that kind of life was now behind him. When Gonza asked if he had any grand ambitions, Led said he just wanted to run the pharmacy well and enjoy chatting with everyone. Thus, Led's retirement officially began. However, after so many days of opening, the pharmacy still had no customers. If no one came soon, the herbs and medicines in the store would expire. Finally, on a stormy day, Led welcomed his first customer, the blonde-haired girl who had become interested in Led after hearing the Adventurers Guild receptionist's words. The girl's name was Rizlet, who had once been Led's temporary teammate and was now one of the B-rank adventurers in this border town. Her true identity was the second princess of the Duchy of Lagurvia. Recently, there had been growing calls in the country that the second princess was more suited to be king than the crown prince. Fearing the family would be plunged into turmoil due to rumors, Rizlet hurriedly left and never expected to meet Led here. Led and his teammates first met Rizlet in a small tavern in Lagurvia. A man was harassing girl. Just as Led was about to intervene, Rizlet subdued the man herself. Then she challenged the hero Ruti, claiming their duchy could repel the demon army even without the hero's help. However, the hero's party still assisted the duchy's forces. Led and Rizlet grew closer as a result, exchanging information with each other. At that time, Rizlet was still tsundere, refusing to admit she liked Led's cookies, but her hand reached out anyway. When the final battle against the demon army came, Rizlet's master led the troops as bait, ordering the hero's party to hold the fortress. However, her master had already been consumed by the demon army boss, and this master was actually a demon in disguise. He kept the hero's party in the fortress to annihilate Rizlet's main force. At the critical moment, Led sensed something was wrong and rushed to save Rizlet. Then Ruti appeared and instantly killed the demon general Shisandan with one strike. This event hit Rizlet hard, as both her master and the soldiers were people she had known, and she had to watch them die before her eyes. Rizlet immediately lost the will to fight. Led told Rizlet they planned to break through the encirclement to request reinforcements, but the most important thing was whether Logurvia's will and pride still remained in this battle. He hoped the war would be won by Logurvia's will, not the heroes. Otherwise, Logurvia would still be unable to fight the demon army after the hero left. After hearing this, Rizlet finally stood up. In this war, she represented not only herself, but also the will of the entire Logurvia army. In the end, they together annihilated the demon army. The two chatted about the past, and the atmosphere in the room instantly became ambiguous. Rizlet asked Led why he was here. Led told her about how he was kicked out of the team for being too weak. This made Rizlet furious. Even she knew how crucial Led's role as a versatile support was to the team. Yet recently, the heroes' party had defeated one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon army, and it seemed they were even stronger without Led. Then Rizlet asked if she could work at the store. Led naturally refused on the spot. After all, she was one of only 2 B-rank adventurers in town. Rizlet had even given up being a hero just to work for him, but Led said his pharmacy business was terrible and there was no need to hire anyone. Rizlet then reminded him to produce medicines that could only be bought at his store. This made Led remember he had actually created 2 original potions. One was an enhancement potion that could be mixed into finished magic potions to increase their effectiveness 5-fold. Rizlet immediately said such a market-disrupting potion would never be allowed to sell, and the guild wouldn't stand for it. She had always thought Led was amazing and capable of everything, but she never expected him to be so clumsy, which only made Rizlet want to stay even more. Her words made Led a little embarrassed, so he quickly introduced the second one, new anesthetic. Although its effects were the same as the old version, it reduced dependency. Rizlet said this would require approval from the Zoltan Council to be sold. Through the conversation, Led realized his shortcomings, and hesitantly said Rizlet could come to help occasionally. After happily making this decision, Led also cooked a meal to treat Rizlet. During the meal, Rizlet had already begun fantasizing about their beautiful life together. First, they needed to build a bathroom. Then they would replace the single bed with a romantic double bed. Only then did Led realize Rizlet wanted to live together. Although Led had 1,000 reasons to refuse, he still let Rizlet stay overnight. Waking up early to see the sleeping face of a beautiful girl, Led feared he couldn't restrain himself. He quickly got up to prepare a hearty breakfast. While eating, Led and Rizlet discussed their plans for the day. They needed to buy furniture to decorate the house, and go to the Zoltan Council to apply for a sales permit for the new anesthetic. Rizlet's salary was also settled, 5 gold coins per day, which was almost free labor for her, but Led could provide food and lodging. After the meal, they went to the furniture store together. Rizlet fell in love with a walnut double bed at first sight. To avoid misunderstandings, Led quickly reminded her to buy a single bed, but both Rizlet and Clerk scolded him. Just as they left the furniture store, they saw a group of children bullying Tanta, and they were using skills to do so. In this world, everyone received the blessing of the Supreme God at birth. Blessings were not affected by factors like birth or education. However, those of lower status received higher-level blessings. To succeed, one had to level up, and the only way to do that was to fight and inflict damage on those with blessings. To level up, people would kill each other. These children were no exception. They didn't dare to mess with Led and Rizlet, so they just muttered some threats and hurried away. Tanta's friend Ace was also bullied. Led helped bandage their wounds. Tanta said their bully Atomy had recently awakened a blessing and wasn't that violent before, but after awakening, he became extremely agitated. Led guessed he might have awakened the brawler's blessing, which would cause violent impulses. Ayas said he didn't need any blessing, as he already felt his blessing was Weapon Master, allowing him to master a single weapon to perfection. He worried he might become like a demi. Rizlet and Led comforted the child, telling him the blessing was part of him. He should control it as part of himself, making it his best helper in the future. Ayas happily asked if he could visit Led's pharmacy later, and Led gladly agreed. Then, he and Rizlet went to the Zoltan Council to request approval for selling the new anesthetic, but were refused and even kicked out. Finally, they reached the higher-ups, and due to Rizlet's influence, they got approval. Their feelings for each other quickly deepened that day, and Led seemed to realize Rizlet's feelings for him. The effects of the new medicine will take some time to spread. They had just opened the store and needed some popular and effective medicines. Unable to find a solution for the moment, Led decided to cook first. Unexpectedly, Rizlet's joke during the meal gave him inspiration. Rizlet thought Led's cooking was delicious and suggested selling his dishes in the store. Lead had a sudden idea and decided to create a health supplement that could nourish the body and boost immunity. The previous version of the medicine tasted bitter, but with his cooking skills, he adjusted the flavor and turned it into cookies. The taste turned out to be excellent, and soon Lead's cookies became a bestseller. Overjoyed, Lead lifted Rizlet up directly, making her blush instantly. Lead's retirement life was becoming more and more wonderful. On the other hand, the atmosphere in the hero's party was not so pleasant. The importance of Lead only became apparent after he left. The teammates found that without Lead, their actions became constrained. The martial artist Danan even considered leaving the team to find Lead, and surprisingly, Ruti agreed. Thus, Danon set out on the journey to find Lead. After living together with Rizlet, Lead had to struggle every morning upon waking up, as opening his eyes was such a shock. The two lived a simple and happy life, something Lead could never have imagined before. The news of Rizlet retiring from the Adventurers Guild spread quickly. After seeing off the adventurers, Rizlet suddenly expressed a desire to drink honey wine. After getting Lead's permission, she happily went to buy some. At that moment, an uninvited guest entered the store. He was Albert, another B-rank adventurer in town, the same squad leader who had previously asked Lead for help with directions, but was refused. Albert asked Lead if he had killed the owlbear in the forest last time. He had felt something was off at the time. The wounds on the owlbear were made by a blunter weapon, like Lead's worn-out sword that he always carried. Lead didn't want to reveal his true strength. As a low-rank adventurer, he couldn't possibly have killed the owlbear. Facing Albert's aggressive questioning, Lead showed no intention of displaying his abilities. Just then, Rizlet, seeing what happened, immediately kicked Albert away and demanded to know what he had just done to her important person. Lead quickly explained that Albert had only wanted to invite him to join the adventurer squad. However, Albert keenly noticed that Lead, who had been behind the counter, suddenly appeared outside in the blink of an eye. Albert realized Lead's strength was not to be underestimated, and with Rizlet B-rank adventurer, he could only leave grudgingly. Lead then quickly cheered Rizlet up. The two enjoyed a hearty meal together and drank honey wine. Now only the bathroom remained unfinished, but Lead said Gonze would come to help soon. Then he suggested taking Rizlet for a sauna. Lead also invited two good friends, Gonze and Storm. The three turned the sauna into an endurance contest. To distract themselves, the friends started asking about Lead and Rizlet's happy life together. Fed up with the pointless chatter, Lead added water to the stove to heat up the sauna room, and Gonze finally passed out from the heat. While resting outside, they heard the owner complain that a new public bathhouse had recently opened elsewhere. It not only had the latest sauna equipment, but also included a restaurant and massage services, which had caused his business to decline recently. Lead and Gonze were regular customers here. Unwilling to see the owner close the shop, they decided to find ways to attract more customers after returning. Lead tried to develop an herbal sachet. It was said that some primitive elves still lived a very primitive lifestyle. When they fell ill, they would boil herbs in a pot and use the steam for therapeutic effects. Lead imitated them by creating an herbal sachet. When hung over the stove, the aroma of the herbs would diffuse into the room along with the steam, providing relaxation and benefits for the throat. The owner tried the sachet and found it excellent, expressing his gratitude. Lead's pharmacy also gained a steady order. After adding the sachet, they naturally wanted to try the new sauna experience. While Lead was enjoying the sauna, Rizlet and Gonze's sister walked in unexpectedly. Lead tried to escape by wrapping himself in a towel but was stopped by Rizlet. Neo also egged them on, leaving Lead no choice but to stay. Listening to the two girls discuss him in front of him, Lead felt unbearably hot and accidentally fainted from the heat. After the sauna, the two families walked back together. After saying goodbye to Gonze, Lead and Rizlet prepared to head home, when Rizlet suddenly stopped Lead. She explained why she had wanted to drink honey wine before. In Lagurvia, newlyweds would take a month off after marriage, spending their time together drinking honey wine. That was why she had wanted to try it. With Rizlet's clear confession, Lead could no longer pretend not to understand. He smiled and asked Rizlet to come home with him, and the two walked side by side toward home under the sunset. Meanwhile, the poor sister was still at the front line missing her brother. The Templar Theodora asked the new girl, Tis, if she was disappointed with their current team situation. Actually, they weren't like this before. They didn't have to worry about anything outside of battle. They could naturally cooperate with each other in combat. But all of that disappeared after Lead was gone. The team fell apart. It was only then that they realized Lead was the indispensable person in the team. On this day, another uninvited guest arrived at Lead's pharmacy. the leader of the Adventurers Guild, came to see Rizlet. After hearing the news, Rizlet calmly finished tidying up in the store before going out. The moment she stepped out, a man walked into the shop. He immediately produced an elven coin, offering it to Led if he would break up with Rizlet. Led refused on the spot. After all, Rizlet was his priceless treasure, and he recognized the man before him as a member of the Thieves Guild. Outside, Rizlet announced to the Adventurers Guild that she had signed a lifelong employment contract with Led. She warned that if they dared to offend Led, she would leave as well. Hearing her words from inside, Led gave her an amber bracelet as a symbol of the lifelong contract. Led asked Rizlet which gemstone she preferred, and she shyly replied that she would like any gift from Led. For a moment, the atmosphere between them became intimate. Meanwhile, the Thieves Guild had found someone who knew Rizlet's weakness. As the leader of the Thieves Guild, Big Hawk actually did not want Rizlet to leave the Adventurers Guild. He feared that if she became an ordinary citizen, she would pose a threat to them. At least the Adventurers Guild could impose some restrictions on her. The Thieves Guild leader ordered the informant to use any means necessary to force Rizlet to recall her time in the Adventurers Guild. However, Led and Rizlet remained unaware of the turmoil in the town. Their feelings for each other grew stronger day by day, prompting Rizlet to recall some past experiences. At that time, they had to break through the encirclement to seek reinforcements from a neighboring country, requiring the help of the elf Yarandrala to cross the misty forest. Led and Yarandrala shared a very close relationship. Along the way, they chatted and laughed, with Yarandrala even holding Led's arm most of the time. Yarandrala quickly noticed Rizlet's jealousy. During a bath, Yarandrala quietly asked Rizlet if she liked Led, telling her that Led also had feelings for her but that she needed to break the bad habit of getting angry when shy. Yarandrala also taught Rizlet to express her feelings in a joking manner. By this point, Rizlet had already acknowledged her feelings for Led, so she asked Yarandrala if she had feelings for Led. Surprisingly, Yarandrala denied it without hesitation. As an elf with a much longer lifespan than humans, she had learned her lesson and no longer chose humans as lovers. Therefore, she sincerely hoped Led could find happiness. Led carried many burdens in the team, and Yarandrala saw this but couldn't say much. Still, she hoped Led could enjoy his own ordinary happiness, rather than being taken for granted as he was now. If it were Rizlet, she might be able to form a mutually supportive relationship with him. Although Rizlet didn't fully understand Yarandrala's words, she still agreed. During the journey, the group unexpectedly discovered traces of the Demon Lord's army. It seemed their intelligence had been leaked, and it was likely due to Ares previously gathering information from the mercenary team. Led did not blame his teammates. The most important thing now was to figure out how to break through. After determining the number of enemies, Led immediately decided to act as bait, while Rizlet and Ruti looked for an opportunity to break through. The composed Ruti agreed with the plan, but Rizlet was more worried about Led's safety. Fortunately, their plan succeeded, with Ruti single-handedly defeating all the enemy forces, and Led remaining unharmed. Ruti assured him that such a thing would not happen again. After that great battle, Rizlet did not join the heroes' team. On one hand, she needed to rebuild her own country, and on the other, she felt she could not interfere in the relationship between Ruti and Led. Later, she embarked on a journey alone, never expecting to see Led again in this border town. A miraculous coincidence that made Rizlet sigh in amazement. But the next moment, Led reminded her it was time to make a delivery. However, on her way to deliver the medicine, Rizlet was stopped by a man. Durlaus knew Rizlet's true identity as a princess, and advised her to return to being an adventurer or go back to Logurvia, as the issue of succession to the throne seemed to be nearing resolution. Unbeknownst to him, Rizlet cared about none of that. All she wanted was to stay with Led. At this moment, the poor sister Ruti was still thinking about her brother. When Led left initially, Ares told her that Led had gone to scout the Demon Lord's army alone. Then Ares tried to comfort Ruti, but she beat him half to death on the spot. Since heroes cannot harm their companions, Ruti suppressed her anger and treated him. However, this incident left a psychological shadow in Ares' heart. From then on, Ruti became even more silent, and the entire heroes' team fell into a gloomy mood. Today, when Led was delivering medicine to Dr. Winters, he suddenly heard a noise outside. It turned out to be a man lying unconscious on the ground, apparently poisoned. Led immediately pulled out an antidote and made the man take it, then helped carry him to Dr. Winters' clinic. After the diagnosis, the doctor confirmed that the culprit was the anesthetic, the kind that had just been recently approved. Previously, Led's improved anesthetic had been rejected by the Zoltan Council, precisely because the anesthetic had been used for other purposes, and many people had already been poisoned by it. The doctor also reminded Led to prepare the antidote in advance. After returning, Led told Rizlet about this. Rizlet wondered who had brought in this drug, but these matters were no longer their concern. They were just running a pharmacy. All they needed to do was live their own lives well. The two rode a dragon to the riverside for camping. After Led finished setting up the tent, Rizlet showed Led her newly bought swimsuit. The two enjoyed themselves in the water. After playing, they grilled meat together. After a drink, Rizlet started feeling dizzy again and blurted out everything she had been holding back. She had tried so hard to make advances toward Led, yet he remained unmoved, making her feel awkward. Before she could finish, Led held her hand, explaining that he would feel embarrassed if he showed a shy expression. The intimate atmosphere prompted Rizlet to kiss Led. After playing by the river to change their mood, the two returned to the pharmacy to work. At that moment, Rizlet mentioned that a new anesthetic was spreading widely in the market. According to adventurers, drinking it would make one a completely new person. No sooner had she finished speaking than a blood-covered man burst in. Led treated the man's wounds, while Rizlet rushed out to see what was happening. She found that members of Albert's team were harming ordinary residents. After a few exchanges, Rizlet noticed that their strength had increased significantly compared to before. Despite this, they were still no match for her. However, during Rizlet's fierce battle with them, Albert also appeared. His teammates had injured people, yet instead of apologizing, he acted arrogantly, ordering Rizlet to call her fiancé to treat the injured. Rizlet almost wanted to kill him on the spot. After returning, she lay on Led's lap cooing. Those people seemed to have been enhanced by the drug, which bothered Rizlet a little. But for now, she just wanted to lie on Led's lap and take a nap. At that moment, Tanta brought Eyes over to play. Led prepared a meal to entertain them. After eating and drinking, the two explained their purpose. He had felt his blessing the day before and then experienced a strange unease. He did not want to use the power of his blessing. If possible, he just wanted to live as an ordinary person, relying on general abilities. Led told him not to rush and to take his time thinking about his specialized weapon. Just after seeing off the two children, another female teammate of Albert came to apologize, feeling very sorry that their teammate had caused trouble for Rizlet. Albert had been working hard taking on missions. The female teammate explained that Albert possessed an extremely powerful blessing, the Champion, a hero's blessing that enabled him to overcome difficulties and accomplish great deeds. The urge it gave him was to proclaim his strength to the world. Albert's inability to harness his power had led him to end up in Zoltan. Although he seemed to have a bad temper, he was also striving to become a hero of Zoltan. Led and Rizlet expressed understanding, though in truth, these matters had nothing to do with them. A storm would pass through Zoltan in the coming days, so Led and Rizlet decided not to open for business. After bringing in the items outside, Led brewed a sweet honey milk. He remembered that his sister Ruti loved this drink the most. When they were children, they once encountered a storm. Led asked Ruti if she was afraid. Naturally unafraid, having been born with the hero's blessing, Ruti still obediently stretched out her hand when she heard her brother say he was afraid and wanted to hold her hand. Only after holding her hand did Led tell Ruti that he had just made it up. He wasn't afraid of the storm. He had just wanted to hold Ruti's hand. When his sister asked what the point of that was, he replied there was no special meaning. Humans engage in all sorts of seemingly meaningless actions. Led taught Ruti these ordinary things in this way, making her more like a normal girl rather than a hero machine without desires or demands. Just snapping out of the memory, Led heard knocking at the door. He opened it to find Dr. Winters carrying the unconscious Eyes. The doctor explained that Eyes had been knocked unconscious by a stone blown by the wind. At that moment, Eyes woke up. He excitedly told everyone that Ademi had attacked his parents, and he was holding an axe. Ademi was the older kid who had bullied him and Tanta before. Upon hearing this, everyone rushed to Eyes' home. Fortunately, his parents were not in life-threatening danger, but Ademi was nowhere to be found. The situation became complicated because Ademi was the son of the captain of the guard. After hearing about this, the townspeople believed the captain was hiding Ademi, and the public's dissatisfaction with the guards grew. Eyes' parents were taken to the house of Big Hawk, a member of the Thieves' Guild, for treatment. Eyes temporarily stayed at Led and Rizlet's home, where he learned swordsmanship from Rizlet. Under the guidance of the weapons master, he quickly became proficient in wielding his swords. Rizlet and Led were enjoying their rare moment of affection when the Gonzi siblings suddenly rushed over to tell them that Tanta had been arrested by the guards. Ice also became worried about his friend and followed Led and Rizlet to the Adventurers Guild. They hoped the guild leader would officially assign them to investigate alongside the guards, allowing them to attend Tanta's interrogation. In truth, this brought no benefit to the guild, but it was a favor for Rizlet, so the leader agreed immediately. With the assignment in hand, they went to the guard post and met Tanta. The guard captain had not harmed him. He only wanted Tanta to assist in the investigation. His subordinate suspected that people from the southern district had killed Ademi, especially since the troublemakers last time were also from the south. The guards deeply loved Ademi and refused to believe he could do such a thing, even accusing Ias of lying. In reality, Ias's parents had only fainted, and Ademi never used an axe, so the guards were certain it couldn't have been him. Surprisingly, Tanta shared the same view. It turned out that after Ademi had bullied them before, he had even apologized to Tanta, as he was troubled by the fighting expert's blessing. His dream was to become a guard, but his violent behavior now made him seem like a thug. Ice quietly pondered these matters, which were far too complex for children. The guard captain sent them away but asked Led and Rizlet to assist in the investigation. Led immediately asked the most critical question: had Ademi used the rumored anesthetic? The guard captain flustered, revealing his own uncertainty. The anesthetic was known to enhance blessings, and Ademi's condition was indeed similar to that of the adventurers who had caused trouble last time. The incident involving the anesthetic was growing more serious, and now Rizlet and Led could no longer ignore it. After leaving the guard post, Led returned to the pharmacy to continue teaching Ias swordsmanship. Meanwhile, Rizlet quietly conducted an investigation. She indeed discovered people engaged in shady dealings, but unexpectedly walked into an ambush. As she fought those men, Danon surprisingly arrived to assist. Danon explained that he had been sent by the hero to find Led. Originally, he intended to take Led away, but now it seemed Led had found his place here. Danon pulled back the cloak of one of the corpses, revealing them to be mid-level stealth demons. Rizlet felt increasingly uneasy about the situation, as her investigation suggested the Thieves' Guild was involved. Danon said he couldn't meet Led for now and asked Rizlet to keep it a secret, suggesting they exchange information privately. Thus, Rizlet, exhausted, returned to the pharmacy, immediately sitting in Led's arms upon entering. Led happily embraced his wife, then pulled out a sword for her to examine. It had been given to Ias earlier that day by an unfamiliar alchemist who claimed to be the envoy of the Thieves' Guild leader. Rizlet found the sword itself to be of excellent quality, but it had been enchanted with a tracking spell, allowing the caster to locate the bearer. They didn't know what the Thieves' Guild intended to do with Ice. The continuous turmoil made Rizlet uneasy. She just wanted to live a simple life with Led, but trouble always found them. The two decided not to let Ias use that sword again, and instead had a dwarf craftsman make him a custom one. While waiting for the sword, Led suddenly heard commotion outside. Someone was leading a protest against the guards, reportedly hired by Big Hawk to stir up trouble. On the other side, Ruti the hero led her teammates to defeat another great demon. Without Led, Ares once again became a drag on the team. When he held them back before, Led would cover for him, but now no one would help him. After defeating the great demon, the hero's party obtained the trophy airship, which made their travel much faster. Yet, Ruti's deepest desire was to be by her brother's side. Meanwhile, Led and Rizlet, having confessed their feelings, had progressed rapidly and were now sharing the same bed. A few days later, Rizlet, who always carried her tracking sword, was finally found by Big Hawk's men. The attackers were indeed demons disguised as humans. At the same time, the alchemist seized Ias alone in the pharmacy and took him to the Thieves' Guild. Big Hawk admitted that he had spread the anesthetic in the city, aiming to become the leader of Zoltan and change the city. The drugs were actually demon blessings, made from demon hearts. The gods grant each person only one blessing, and humans live to fulfill its duty. However, most are unable to do so due to lack of ability, like Albert. Many are also dissatisfied with their blessings, as their true desires differ from the duties their blessings entail, just like Led the Guide, who simply wanted a quiet life. Thus, demon blessings are like a gospel to these people, offering them a new blessing and a fresh start. Ias was utterly confused, but Big Hawk had Ademi brought in immediately. Everything was now in place. He would use these two children to incite rebellion in the city, protesting against the guards under the pretense of seeking justice for Ice and his parents. After a passionate speech, he ordered 2 guards to bring Ademi forward. These guards were also people Big Hawk had arranged in advance. They accused the guard team in front of the residents, admitting they had hidden Ademi. The residents failed to recognize this was a trick and became furious, demanding to overthrow the council's rule. Big Hawk also urged Ias to kill Ademi to avenge his parents. After fanning the flames, Ias's violent nature, brought on by his blessing, was truly awakened. He took the knife and swung it at Ademi, but only managed to cut the rope. At that moment, Ias recalled the teachings of Led and Rizlet. However, Ademi could not control his blessing. He had drunk the demon's potion and would become violent upon seeing weapons. Just then, Led appeared in time and took the two children away, disappearing from everyone's view at incredible speed. Back, Led gave Ademi a potion that temporarily suppressed his blessing's urge. At that moment, a man named Buna approached. He had previously spoken to Danon offering to help find Led, and now assisted Rizlet in her actions. They had already devised a plan. Led asked Buna to take the two children away first, while he faced the pursuers alone. It was unexpected that Albert had also joined Big Hawk's camp. The current Big Hawk had long become an empty shell, with a contract demon possessing his body. The demon, following Big Hawk's wishes, took his place as the king of Zoltan. The Adventurers Guild and the guard team immediately closed in. Albert refused to accept this outcome. The thought of possibly living out his days as a criminal spurred him to charge at Led with all his might. In the next instant, Albert's arm was struck by Led. The speed too fast to see confirmed the man's strength before him. Meanwhile, the two children explained the situation to the residents. Ace publicly forgave Ademi. With the parties involved speaking as they did, the residents' fervor was in vain, and they dropped their weapons and went home. The crisis in Zoltan was thus resolved. Big Hawk and Albert were thrown into prison. Buna then patted Big Hawk on the shoulder and unhesitatingly called out the true name of the contract demon, Belial. To everyone's surprise, Buna's true identity was Shizundan, the demon that Rizlet and the heroes' party had once defeated. Immediately, Belial broke free from his contract with Big Hawk, reverting to his original form before swiftly escaping to Albert. Belial made Albert wish to leave and go to the hero's side, and the two vanished together from the prison cell. At that moment, Shizundan walked over with an evil smile. After Albert disappeared, Shizundan rose to prominence in the town, quickly advancing to B-class to become Zoltan's new hero. Meanwhile, Albert was taken to the hero's party by Belial. Surprisingly, Belial immediately defected to Ruti, stating they had no intention of fighting against the humans of the continent. They also believed in the supreme god, and their sole goal was to punish the heretics who defied the divine, the Demon King. Additionally, they gave Ruti a potion of demon blessing. Upon learning it could weaken her original blessing, Ruti drank it without hesitation. The potion was made by transforming the resentment of slain demons into curses, combined with demon blessings. If the curse failed to activate, the demon blessing might disappear. However, after drinking it, Ruti indeed felt her hero blessing was weaker than before. Thus, she secretly left with her new partner, Tisei, aboard an airship, heading to Zoltan to find a way to obtain the potion. Soon, winter arrived and Led's pharmacy business worsened. He decided to make hand warmers, first selling them to his good friend Gonze. Gonze tried them and found them excellent, immediately recommending them to his co-workers. Through word of mouth, Led's hand warmers became wildly popular in town, selling out every evening by the time he went home. Fortunately, his wife came to pick him up, having saved a hand warmer for him. The two walked hand in hand through the heavy snow. A few days later, Ruti and Tisei arrived in Zoltan. They did not venture deep into the town, but stayed on the outskirts for a few days, helping to deal with the monsters in the forest. At night, Led went to a tavern with the gatekeeper for a drink. Coincidentally, Tisei was also drawn to the shop and sat down next to Led. The two sized each other up and sensed each other's strength. Tisei then returned to the inn and told Ruti about it, convinced that the man must be the strongest adventurer in Zoltan. They considered whether to ally with him or oppose him. Ruti believed an alliance would be difficult because she had already found the alchemist who made the potion, who was now locked up in the prison. That meant they would have to break him out. However, for the hero Ruti, this was no big problem. She began wandering around the town, looking for the best opportunity, constantly imagining her brother by her side offering advice. When she snapped back to reality, she was alone. Recently, a curse had appeared in the town, causing the water spirits in the forest to be unable to sleep. They specifically invited Led and Rizlet over. The curse targeted only the strong, absorbing their mental energy, while the other residents showed symptoms of a common cold. It seemed another conspiracy was brewing in Zoltan. At night, Ruti directly broke into the prison and rescued the alchemist. Since she had to conceal her identity as the hero, she couldn't use the healing hand. The only way to heal the alchemist's wounds was to buy medicine from a pharmacy. In this way, the siblings accidentally met. Ruti, who had been expressionless, suddenly revealed an excited smile and quickly rushed into her brother's arms. They exchanged information, and Led learned that after he left, the team had not improved but had instead fallen apart. Even so, he couldn't go back, because he had already found his place in this pharmacy. Unexpectedly, upon hearing that her brother didn't want to leave, Ruti immediately decided to stay as well. Just as she finished speaking, Rizlet returned. After a brief greeting, Ruti stood up and left. Led walked up, patted her head, and told her she could come to his pharmacy anytime. However, as soon as Ruti stepped out of the pharmacy, she sat down on the ground. It was the hero's blessing, reminding her not to forget her duties. Ruti had to continue drinking the potion to suppress the blessing. She couldn't tell her brother her plans, and could only find a place to hide the alchemist, urging him to start making the medicine as soon as possible. Suddenly, they remembered that the forest where the airship had landed seemed to have an elf's ruin, which would be the perfect hiding spot. After settling the alchemist in the elf's ruin, Ruti and Tisei began visiting Led's pharmacy every day. Led even took them to a sauna. Because the hero was so unusual, she still drew attention from others. At night, Ruti once again proposed taking a bath with Rizlet. It was obvious she had something to say to her alone. Rizlet naturally didn't refuse. Unexpectedly, Ruti immediately asked if Rizlet had already bathed with Led, and Rizlet honestly admitted it. Ruti also told her that when she was a child, she often bathed with her brother. Back then, she was weak, and her brother had always protected her. When Ruti was 5, she went as a hero to the nearby mountains to search for a lost child. However, there was an owlbear near the child. At that time, Ruti couldn't defeat it at all. Because of this hero's blessing, she had to endure suffering for others while living, only to be gossiped about behind her back. Ruti had had enough of this, yet she didn't want to stop seeing her brother because of it. Finally, when the owlbear approached and attacked her, Led arrived and split the owlbear in half with a single slash. Then, he tightly hugged Ruti, apologizing for being too late. In truth, Ruti now felt nothing at all, not even the comfort she used to feel during baths. Her body could resist any abnormal state. Due to the influence of the blessing, Ruti's emotions grew increasingly detached. She could only cling to the memories of the past with her brother, which made her extremely jealous of Rizlet. Before she knew it, Ruti was already crying tears. She told Rizlet that she would rather be Rizlet than a hero. The hero saves the world, but who saves the hero? To save Ruti, Tisei decided to fulfill her duty as a friend. She told Led about Ruti drinking the potion and breaking out of prison. They both knew that while the potion would weaken the original blessing, if the blessing was weakened to the point of complete loss of resistance, the drinker might be poisoned. To prevent Ruti from suffering the same fate as the others in the town, Led decided to seek help from the alchemist at the elf ruins. Unexpectedly, they encountered Danon on the way, along with the hero squad tracking Ruti. Theodora and Albert, upon seeing Led, immediately hid and eavesdropped on their conversation from the next table. Led noticed Danon had lost an arm and asked what had happened. However, upon hearing about the hero, Danon insisted on joining them to save Ruti. The two got up and left, continuing their conversation as they walked. However, Ares, who was waiting at the inn, also saw Danon, and his arm was completely intact. But this Danon looked strange. He not only asked where the hero had gone, but also revealed to Ares that Led was now enjoying a happy life with Rizlet. Ares became even angrier. They were fighting against the demon army on the front lines, while Led was dating in the rear. Now, even the hero had come here for him. Filled with rage, Ares immediately took Danon to the pharmacy and directly destroyed Led's shop, shattering the double bed into pieces. In reality, this Danon was Shisandan in disguise. The real Danon told Led that he had been attacked during the voyage, his right arm bitten off before he fell into the sea. He was later rescued after drifting to the port town. Shisandan must have come here as well. Just then, the fake Danon and Ares flew past them on a dragon, heading toward the forest where Ruti was. The two immediately chased after them separately. Led met Rizlet and Tisei on the road and told them about Danon's story. Rizlet suddenly remembered that the Danon she had encountered earlier had an intact arm, which was likely Shisandan. She regretted not telling Led in time. Now that Shisandan had been revived, Rizlet decided to pick up her sword again and become a hero to defeat him. Subsequently, Led went alone to the elf ruins and found the alchemist. Ruti, hearing the alchemist's shouts, rushed over only to discover her brother. Led told Ruti that he had already heard the whole story from Tisei and did not blame her for it. In fact, he had been searching for a way to suppress Ruti's blessing. Ruti expressed her confusion, as she had always believed her brother wanted to save the world. That was why she had worked hard to become stronger and joined the Knight's Order to embark on the journey to defeat the Demon King. However, Led told Ruti that from the beginning, he had only wanted to protect his sister, not because of his identity as a hero, but simply because Ruti was very important to him. He knew that one day Ruti would embark on this journey, which was why he had been preparing for that day. Even if Ruti gave up on being a hero, he would not blame her. Understanding her brother's feelings, Ruti finally felt relieved. Soon after, Rizlet and Tisei arrived as well. Now that everything had been clarified, Led decided to ask the alchemist how to make the potion. The raw material required a demon's heart, but the effect of the demon's heart would be treated as a curse, so the blessing would not activate on the hero. The reason Ruti weakened the hero's blessing was because she had developed another unnamed blessing, which had no skills or impulses. For now, it could only be tentatively concluded that this blessing was less harmful. Just as they finished speaking, some noises came from outside. When everyone went out to investigate, they saw the Eye of Calamity. Led instructed Rizlet to protect the alchemist and Tisei, while he and Ruti charged forward. The two quickly found the caster Ares. At this point, Ares was mentally unstable. He believed everyone was useless. Only he and Ruti deserved to embark on the journey to defeat the Demon King. Just as Led was about to argue, he was knocked against the wall by Ares' attack. Angered, Ruti retaliated by slashing Ares. However, out of consideration for their past teammates, she spared his life. She immediately went back to help her brother heal and left with him, leaving Ares to fend for himself. As soon as they left, Shisanden appeared. He had intended to be friendly with Ares, but Ares had an identification skill and had already seen through him as a demon. So Shisanden dropped the act and began persuading Ares to join him in searching for the treasure left by the first hero. He claimed that if they gave the treasure to Ruti, she would change her mind. Thus, Shisanden took Ares to the lower levels of the ruins. Meanwhile, Led and the others regrouped. Using Tisei's detection skill, they noticed that Ares was accompanied by another person. Led suspected it was likely Shisanden. Worried that his former teammate would be deceived by the demon, he chased after them. On the other side, Danan encountered Theodora and Albert. They found Shisanden before Led did. To avenge the loss of his arm, Danan engaged in a fierce battle with Shisanden. Shisanden was quickly overpowered and unable to fight back. Just then, Ares turned his attack on his own teammate. Seizing the opportunity, Shisanden immediately stabbed Danan with his sword and returned to his true form. His 6 arms slashed violently at Danan, who finally collapsed. Ares remained completely calm, likely because this wasn't the first time he had betrayed his teammates. The two then opened the final door, revealing a golden chest containing 5 swords identical to the holy sword Ruti used. Shisanden told Ares that Ruti's demon-slaying sword was actually a replica of the first hero's sword, and the true divine swords were all here. Moreover, the hero was created by the gods copying the soul of the first hero. Ares' wish was to make Ruti the hero again. To achieve this, he needed to do 2 things. First, give Ruti the true divine sword, which had the power to strengthen the hero's blessing, thus restoring her weakened blessing. Second, take away her identity as Ruti by killing Led. Shisanden picked up one of the divine swords and handed it to Ares, who had already made his decision. Just then, Led and the others arrived, causing a massive melee. Led and his companions fought Shisanden, while Ruti faced Ares alone. In a single strike, Ruti shattered the so-called divine sword with her energy blade. Even Shisanden couldn't help but be amazed that Ruti's power had surpassed that of the first hero. At this moment, Tisei sensed something approaching from behind. To everyone's surprise, it was their other teammate Theodora. Theodora first tied up Rizlet and then launched an attack on Ruti. It turned out she also believed Ruti had to become the hero. To save the world, Ruti had no choice but to sacrifice herself, as it was the will of the gods. However, Rizlet disagreed with this view. She loudly refuted Theodora, saying a hero was not defined by some blessing but by the person who possessed it. Just as it wasn't the hero who saved their duchy, but those who shed blood for the people. These words shook Theodora's heart. Unexpectedly, Shisanden also agreed with Rizlet, telling them a hero wasn't an ability. Only those who aspired to be heroes could truly be called heroes. While everyone was talking, Led took the opportunity to kill Theodora's dragon in one strike. Unbeknownst to them, Ares had been waiting for this exact moment. He immediately conjured a large cube out of thin air and crashed it into the two. Rudy tried to rescue them but was blocked by Shisandan and Theodora working together. Ares had now completely lost his mind. He launched an attack on Tisei and the alchemist. At that moment, Danon punched Led and Rizlet, sending them flying. In the end, Ares was restrained by Tisei's spiderweb, and Led rushed forward to strike him. But Ruti, blinded by rage, picked up the true divine sword. With a series of attacks, she completely defeated Shisandan. However, Ruti once again fell under the control of the hero's blessing, even attempting to attack her own brother. Fortunately, Tisei stepped in front of Led in time. Tisei told Ruti she couldn't hurt the most important person to her. Led understood from Ruti's expression. He entrusted Tisei to the others, and personally engaged his sister in combat. With superb fighting skills, he made the divine sword slip from her grasp. Finally, Ruti regained her senses and burst into tears in her brother's arms. Danon and Albert also returned. At this moment, Rizlet reminded them that Tisei was about to die. Ruti immediately stepped forward to initiate healing. Unexpectedly, her skills failed to work. The hero's blessing no longer responded to her. Fortunately, Theodora woke up in time. With her own healing skills, she cured Tisei. Now, Theodora had realized just how lonely and cruel the fate of being called a hero truly was. Even so, she still hoped Ruti would continue to play the role of the hero. Eventually, Tisei woke up, and Ruti was completely relieved. She told Theodora that she wanted to live as Ruti. If there truly was a hero, Theodora would be the more suitable one. She had been fighting for this world, and that determination was proof of being a hero. Theodora had an epiphany. Thus, a new hero was born. Ruti stayed in the town to live with her family. They also held a funeral for Ares with Danon. At night, Led and Rizlet reaffirmed their feelings for each other. Led promised Rizlet that his journey was over. From now on, he only wanted to be with Rizlet forever. The two even replaced their bed with a double bed, finally putting their plan to have children on the agenda. Early the next morning, Led took his sister for a stroll around the town, introducing Ruti to familiar faces. The lazy yet happy life continued. Ruti also stayed in the town to become an adventurer. This time, she fought of her own will. After hearing their story from the alchemist, Yarandrala couldn't wait to reunite with them. The first season's story ends here. The second season will air in a few days. The man encountered an elf girl in the forest. He thought he could clap with her tonight, but the next second, she tied him up. It turned out the elf was Yarandrala, a companion of the hero Ruti. She had left the forest to search for her former hero partner Led. Led had been kicked out of the hero's team due to jealousy from the sage in the team. After that, he settled in the border town of Zoltan, living a leisurely life. During this time, Led met Rizlet, the princess of the duchy he had once helped. The two developed feelings for each other while living together. After everyone successfully thwarted the conspiracy of the demon general Shisandan, hero Ruti also decided to stay in Zoltan and live with her brother Led. That's why Yarandrala, upon learning that the man knew Led's whereabouts, forced him to lead the way. Since Ruti decided to abandon her hero identity to live by her own will, a new hero was born. He was Van, the 8th prince of a country destroyed by the demon army. Ever since receiving the hero's blessing, his self-awareness had been constantly eroded. Even when humans were killed by monsters, he believed it was their mission to fulfill. Meanwhile, Led and others embarked on another journey. This time wasn't for battle but to search for sapphires at the end of the world. All of this was to make a wedding ring for Rizlet. The dwarf traveling with them also had his own purpose. It turned out his wife was pregnant, and there was a high chance she would need a cesarean section. So he decided to search for sharp earth crystals, as it was said that knives made from them wouldn't cause pain. After resting, the group continued their journey. At that moment, they sensed danger, and several arrows shot out from the forest. Then 2 reckless goblins jumped out, only to be completely eliminated in just 2.5 seconds. However, the dwarf noticed that the weapons the goblins used were ones he had forged. The owner of the weapons was probably already dead. In this world, no one could escape battle forever, because all living beings possessed blessings granted by the gods. To increase the level of the blessing, one had to fight against opponents who also had blessings. At this moment, Ruti didn't know if what she was doing was right or wrong, because she had obtained the strongest hero's blessing in the world, but she was acting against the will of her blessing. Meanwhile, Yarandrala arrived at the pharmacy run by Led. Just as the man said he had completed his task and was about to leave, a guard suddenly came to arrest him. It turned out the man was a criminal. At the time, because they needed his help to make a drug to suppress the hero's blessing, Ruti had rescued him from prison. However, Yarandrala claimed the man was a friend of Rizlet and Led, but the guard insisted it was impossible. The guy not only used demons to attack Rizlet, but also kidnapped the child they had temporarily taken in. Upon hearing this, Yarandrala's expression changed instantly. Anyone who dared betray Led had to die. She immediately summoned vines to kill him, but luckily, Tis arrived in time to save his life. However, Yarandrala was not done with him, and summoned the king of the forest. Seeing this, Tisay grabbed her weapon and charged forward, but due to the vine's restraints, she couldn't get close and was soon bound by Yarandrala. At that moment, a blizzard froze all the vines. The woman was Mistrum, the former mayor of the town, who had high credibility in the Adventurers Guild, but her magic could only buy temporary time, so Tisay immediately took the chance to rush forward. However, it was too late. Yarandrala then began interrogating Tisay, who said she was a friend of Led and Rizlet. If Yarandrala didn't believe her, she could ask them herself. Tisay then told Yarandrala about Led's travel plans and purpose. Upon learning that they were making a wedding ring, Yarandrala immediately lifted the magic. Meanwhile, Led and others arrived at the forest inhabited by Zoogs. The dwarf was panicking because although these mice were small in size, they were man-eating monsters. Led told him not to worry, as the elder of the Zoogs was his friend, and they knew a lot about the end of the world. Soon, the elder of the Zoogs found Led and offered sincere blessings for the love between Led and Rizlet. Led had also brought homemade ham for them, and the elder quickly expressed gratitude, as meat was hard to come by in their place. Led mentioned they were looking for the gem giant, and the elder shared everything he knew, but finally warned them that the gem giant had been very irritable recently, and the reason was still unclear. At that moment, a baby mouse fell from a tree, and Ruti stepped forward to treat it. Meanwhile, Rizlet noticed that the surrounding trees seemed weak, which was why the branches were breaking. Luckily, Led knew how to make tree nutrient solution, and by the time he finished, it was already night. Watching his sleeping sister, Led fell into thought. She had now received a new blessing, and the dehumanizing power of the hero's blessing had disappeared. Led believed her new blessing was not granted by a god but born within Ruti. However, he couldn't understand why this was happening. Meanwhile, Yarandrala, who was chasing Led, also noticed something unusual. The plants along their path were deteriorating as if the land had mutated, though the exact reason was still unknown. During a rest, Yarandrala asked Tisay why she had come along. Tisay used the excuse of wanting to try the natural hot springs at the end of the world, but in truth, she was afraid of what Yarandrala might do upon learning that Ruti was no longer a hero. So she asked Yarandrala why she had become the hero's teammate. It turned out Yarandrala believed helping friends was important, and while saving the world was also something she wanted to do, it was absurd to challenge the Demon King with only 6 people. During their conversation, Yarandrala also sensed the real reason Tisay was following her. The next day, when Led and his companions were resting in an open area, 2 figures appeared on the nearby mountaintop.
Oh, Gideon!
Yarandrala and Tisay had finally caught up with Led. To prevent Led from being betrayed by his companions again, she invited them to move to the kingdom of Kiramin together. Although located in the cold north, the city remained warm at all times due to magic. Most importantly, it was a gathering place for high elves, who would never do the foolish act of betraying their companions. While Led and Rizlet appreciated Yarandrala's kindness, they politely declined her invitation because they were very happy living in Zoltan and had met all kinds of interesting friends. Seeing Yarandrala a little disappointed, Led invited her to live in Zoltan as well. At that moment, Tisay suggested they soak in a hot spring. Soon, she led the group to a hot spring, while Led went to a separate one. Later, Tisay asked Ruti about Led's marriage, and Ruti said it sounded quite nice. Rizlet was not only a good person but also very kind to her brother. The next day, everyone arrived at the Gem Giant's village, but the Gem Giants looked very weak. Led approached the Gem Village chief to exchange Zoltan's crystals for their gems. The beautiful crystals made the Gem Giants very envious, but the village chief said they had no gems to trade, which surprised Led and the others. At that moment, a young Gem Giant stared intently at the crystal, and Led generously gave it to them. It turned out that Gem Giants needed to cut gems to obtain energy. Seeing this, Led immediately distributed the remaining crystals to them, as they would likely starve otherwise. For saving their lives, the Gem Village chief swore they would consider Led a friend for life. After the gem giants had eaten, the village chief explained they had no gems because a gem beast lived nearby. The beast fed on gems and could turn objects into toxic lead, which was also why the Zoog's forest had grown weak. Soon after, Led and others arrived at a gem mining field. At that moment, a spell suddenly struck from behind. Ruti sensed the danger, and everyone barely managed to dodge. The areas hit by the magic spell turned into lead. Then, a gem beast covered in gems emerged from the ground and immediately launched an attack. Seeing this, Ruti rushed forward to block the attack, but she didn't expect that this single strike could shatter her shield. Yarandrala summoned several vines to try to restrain the gem beast, but the vines turned to powder the moment they touched it. Not only that, but ordinary physical attacks also couldn't harm it. So, Ruti pulled out a stronger sword and knocked it to the ground. At this point, Led found it strange. The gem beast's massive size should have been able to collapse mountains. Could it be using magic to support its body? Ruti swung her sword at it, but it surprisingly used a holy shield to block. Immediately after, the gem beast used the same vines as Yarandrala. Yarandrala quickly used magic to break the vines, but the gem beast replicated the same magic again. However, its attack wasn't over yet. Fire and water magic simultaneously struck at the group. Fortunately, Ruti's powerful holy shield was able to withstand the blow. At this moment, Led speculated that the gem beast's body was reinforced by multiple blessings. To defeat it, its blessing power had to be weakened. Led carried a secret potion that could reduce blessing levels, but throwing it into the beast's mouth was extremely difficult. Yarandrala claimed she had a way to restrain the gem beast and immediately summoned the king of the forest to bind it. Led then used vines to fly toward the gem beast, and with Rizlet's cooperation, successfully threw the potion into its mouth. Without the support of blessings, the gem beast instantly collapsed to the ground, and Ruti smashed it to pieces with a single punch. After the battle, the dwarf retrieved the desired earth crystal from the gem beast's body, but Led failed to find the sapphire. Soon, everyone returned to Zoltan. Seeing them so happy, Yarandrala decided to live with them. Meanwhile, the new hero was talking to the bishop when someone reported that a former Demon King's airship was heading towards Zoltan. After the former hero Rudi's team disbanded, Theodora inherited the hero's will. She put on a mask, changed her name to Esta, and joined the new hero's team. She didn't want to disturb Ruti's life again, but the new hero was heading to Zoltan, and a confrontation with Ruti might lead to a violent clash. So she returned to the cabin and told Albert about it. Albert had once been a B-rank adventurer in Zoltan, and Esta hoped he could notify Led before the new hero arrived. Albert agreed without hesitation, but he found one thing strange. Was the new hero Van truly a hero? Esta confirmed that Van had been chosen by the saint and recognized by the church leader, though this hero was quite different from Ruti. Meanwhile, Led and Rizlet dressed in matching outfits, ready to attend Zoltan's Dragon Night Memorial Day. The once leisurely town grew busy as crowds of visitors arrived for the festivities. Since the day's activities would surely leave everyone exhausted, Rizlet suggested giving everyone the next day off. Just then, two black-clad figures passing by, Tise made her wary. Soon after, Yarandrala, who had finished shopping, found the group. She saw many unfamiliar things, especially the precious mask said to be crafted by the great sage. They entered a restaurant, and the owner immediately approached Led upon seeing Yarandrala. She couldn't believe Led knew a Kiramin kingdom elf, and since most Kiramin elves were high elves, they seemed more prestigious. Yarandrala overheard every word. Though she was from the Kiramin kingdom, she was no different from everyone else. Ruti also said Yarandrala was their friend, so there was no need to worry about it. The group then ordered food, and the elf owner quickly prepared the meal. Generously, Ruti treated everyone to an expensive dish. After the feast, they encountered the former mayor and the criminal Godwin, who had now become a business representative. Soon, the bonfire party began. Led and Rizlet danced together hand in hand, while Ruti could only watch enviously from the side. Rizlet noticed her thoughts and asked Led to go accompany his sister. Ruti didn't know if she was allowed to be so happy now. Led said she had suffered so much for others, and now it was her turn to pursue happiness. That night, back in the room, the atmosphere between the two grew even hotter under the moonlight. Led then took out the prepared gift. Although the sapphire hadn't been found, he would definitely give her a ring later. This necklace was to show his determination. After helping Rizlet put it on, she immediately knocked Led to the ground. The following content requires payment. Meanwhile, two figures in the corner were talking about the airship. Tisei jumped down from a tree, scaring the two into fleeing, only to crash into a spiderweb the next second. Tisei thought she could catch them here, but the spiderweb was cut by a hidden flying knife. How leisurely the hero living a slow life island. Every morning, she gets up and does some morning exercises. Then she cleans herself in the courtyard. After that, she goes to the medicinal garden to tend to the herbs. Occasionally, she also deals with nearby monsters. This life couldn't be more comfortable. However, Ruti noticed that Tisei seemed unhappy recently. So, one morning, she woke the sleeping Tisei and said she would take her somewhere. Tisei thought today would be a busy day, but Ruti took her to a bathhouse to soak in the tub. Tisei was puzzled by Ruti's behavior. Later, the two went to the street, where Ruti kept looking around. Tisei thought there might be criminal activity nearby and said she would keep a close watch. Just then, an out-of-control wyvern ran through the street.
Now sit, boy.
Then the two came to a scenic farmland. Ruti told a farmer that a monster was sleeping underground, but the farmer was confused by her words.
Yeah.
This scene shocked the farmer and his son. Ruti said anyone could handle such a monster and emphasized that she was just an ordinary adventurer. However, Tis reminded her that killing monsters bare-handed was actually quite exaggerated. Then Ruti took Tisei to the theater to watch a play. Tisei became even more confused, unable to understand what Ruti was up to. When the play reached its climax, Ruti disappeared. The next second, she appeared on stage, having discovered that the man's sword was cursed by a demon. To avoid causing a commotion, Ruti solved the demon under the guise of the performance.
Oh, brave adventurer! I beg you, please rescue the person I dearly love!
That evening, the two arrived at the elf's restaurant. Seeing Ruti looking dejected, Tisei asked her what her purpose was today. Ruti said she had noticed Tisei seemed troubled lately, so she thought of taking her out to relax. They had planned to stroll around while listening to her vent, deliberately avoiding any attention by not using any skills, and even declaring themselves as ordinary adventurers. Yet, it still became widely known. Tisei said not to worry, as her troubles had actually been resolved that morning. It turned out that a few nights earlier, a group investigating the ship had collected information and prepared to send their findings to Bishop Lubo. However, Kigith demanded they remove any content related to Tisei, which the others naturally refused. Tisei's presence meant the ship's owner could be the hero Ruti, and hiding such crucial information would betray the bishop's trust. No sooner had they finished speaking than Kigith swiftly killed them and sent the edited report. In his eyes, fighting Tisei was more important than the mission. A few days later, sensing something amiss, Tisei boarded the ship, where Kigith was already waiting for her. It turned out the two had once been assassins from the same sect, but Kigith had defected from the Assassin's Guild. Thus, Tisei decided to purge the traitor here. Their battle erupted immediately. Kigith slashed Tisei off the ship, but she used spider silk to rebound and slashed his eye. Seeing she was losing, Kigith resorted to throwing bombs without restraint. To protect the ship, Tisei had to use hidden weapons to detonate the bombs mid-air, but she couldn't block his sneak attack. Just as Kigith threw a bomb, Tisei appeared behind him and knocked him down. Seeing this, Kigith began pleading for mercy, even revealing his employer to save his life, which Tisei found disgraceful. As an assassin, he had no principles at all. In the end, Kigith tried to drink a healing potion, but died before he could. The next day, Tisei told Ruti that the Assassin's Guild wasn't as harsh as everyone thought. Members could refuse missions or choose to retire. They only became assassins because of the blessing. But even so, they all wanted to live well, which was why the guild was a place of mutual support. Meanwhile, Bishop Lubo received intel on the airship's location and decided to head to Zoltan with the new hero. The hero's party was currently battling monsters. Esta realized the church soldiers could no longer continue and urged the hero to retreat. However, Van insisted he could still fight and even believed it was right for church soldiers to sacrifice themselves for the hero. Just as Esta was about to argue, she saw the retreat order. The hero living a slow life remains unbeatable. The group gathered intending to spar, but in just a few moves, they were instantly defeated by Ruti. That day, Led found his former teammate Danon, learning he would soon be discharged and leaving Zoltan. So Led invited him for a drink. However, before parting, Danon wanted to spar with Led. After returning home, Led told Rizlet about it. Though he was certain he would lose, he still needed to train. He didn't want Danon to see him so demoralized. Soon after, Led went outside to practice. He realized his skills were no longer as sharp as before. Just then, Yarendrala waved and ran over. Learning Led was to spar with Danon, she came specifically to help him train. But Rizlet found it strange. Wasn't Yarendrala an elf who used magic? Yarendrala revealed she was actually a dual-wielding elf, excelling in both physical and magical combat. She had even founded her own polearm school. The three then began devising a training plan. The next day, they gathered everyone in a suburban area, a long-awaited reunion of the former hero team. They discussed the news of the mysterious mercenary Esta repelling the demon army's Water King. As former companions, they immediately guessed it was Theodora, and the one-armed swordsman beside her was Albert. Danon said he planned to reunite with them after leaving Zoltan. After eating, it was time for training, but each had their own method. For example, this hero's training involved standing naked under a waterfall. Soon, night fell, and after a day of training, everyone fell asleep. Only Led and Rizlet went to a lake to bathe. The following content remains paid. Soon after everyone's training ended, Led and Danon began their formal sparring session. To protect both of them, Yarendrala cast a merciful spell on them. This spell prevented them from being harmed, but did not lessen the pain. The match then began. In terms of strength, Led was no match for Danon at all. However, due to his knowledge of Danon's techniques, Led was able to hold his own for a while. In the end, Led suffered a crushing defeat. Seeing her brother knocked to the ground, Ruti immediately challenged Danon to a sparring match, and as expected, Danon was quickly subdued by Ruti. That evening, everyone returned to Zoltan, where Albert had been waiting for them for some time. He told them about Esta and delivered a message. A new hero had appeared, and they would soon come to Zoltan in search of the airship. Everyone learned from Albert that the new hero was about to arrive. However, there was something that puzzled Led. Since the church had recognized him as a hero, why hadn't they announced it to the people before? There must be more to it. But now, the most important thing was that the new hero was about to arrive in Zoltan. Ruti's previous battles had never been reported to the church, so they were unaware of the current situation. If people found out that the former hero Ruti had given up fighting the church, would certainly not ignore it. After discussing, the group decided to leave for a while and go somewhere to travel. The herb garden would be taken care of by Tisei, and Yarendrala would help run the shop. As for Danon, he also decided to stay, as his broken arm might be the reason he was kicked out of the hero's team. With that, Led's family set off on their journey. They arrived at a hero village. While out for a stroll, they found an injured woman. Led quickly took her back to the cottage. After asking, it seemed she had been cut at work, allowing poison to enter her body. While magic could ease the pain, it couldn't remove the poison. Although Led could brew potions, the missing herbs needed to be gathered by Ruti. Meanwhile, Rizlet did her best to ease the woman's pain with magic. Then, it started raining heavily, worrying Led. Soon, Ruti returned home covered in mud. It turned out she had fallen into a valley while gathering herbs. After handing the herbs to Led, Ruti went out to find the woman's family. When the sky cleared, Led cured the woman. However, when Led opened the door, a large crowd stood outside. It turned out Ruti didn't know where the woman lived, so she had asked almost everyone in the village. After everything was done, Led fell asleep on his sister's lap. Meanwhile, the new heroes team has arrived in Zoltan, while Tisei quietly observes from the side. Soon after, the small spider delivers the intelligence to Led. For now, there are no major issues. In the evening, the new heroes team visits an upscale restaurant, where Tisei poses as a waiter to continue gathering information. Many high-ranking officials attempt to contact Van, but he ignores them. Even when the waiter brings out the dishes, he refuses, stating that heroes do not need to eat. Seeing this, Esta pulls him outside and advises him against his behavior. However, Van's response remains the same as always. He believes people are merely sacrifices for the heroes' battles. At this moment, the bishop steps forward and arranges for Zoltan's people to search. Their destination is an island inhabited by salt dragons. Esta argues that as long as they do not approach, the dragons will not attack humans, and there is no need to defeat such creatures. But the bishop insists this will upgrade the hero's blessing, and they have received intelligence that the salt dragons stole the fairy king's treasure. Esta tries to persuade further, but with unanimous agreement from the others, she has no choice but to remain silent. Meanwhile, Tisei hides nearby to observe but is noticed by Lavender from the heroes team. Soon after, they set out to defeat the salt dragons and obtain the magic shield from the Fairy King's treasure. Since the new hero arrived in Zoltan, Tisei has been conducting daily surveillance. While no major problems have surfaced yet, she notices a stark difference between the new hero. Rudy's normal emotions as a hero were restricted by her blessing, but Van appears to possess rich emotions, which unsettles Tisei. She believes they should not hand over the airship just yet, and that they should continue observing to see the new hero's true nature. Yarandrala agrees with Ruti's perspective. She then mentions that since Van's arrival, the plants have been acting strangely, and everyone fears a terrible disaster is coming. Meanwhile, the new heroes team encountered a group of children on the road. The children asked Van to go to the church to chat with them. Esta wanted to refuse, but Van surprisingly agreed. Upon arriving at the church, the priest explained the situation to them. These children were all orphans. He and Mistrom were engaged in aid work. After greeting the hero, Mistrom had the children take them to the room. Watching the happy children, Mistrom felt Van was a very kind person. Esta explained that Van was a person deeply focused on his beliefs, which was why he often overlooked others' feelings. In the room, Van was telling the children about his adventure stories. Then they discussed the topic of blessings. Without knowing what blessing one possessed, it was impossible to decide the future path. However, one child said he had decided to become a carpenter in the future and hoped the awakened blessing would be useful for his work. He didn't want to be a hero, he just wanted to help everyone live a happy life. But Van said this was a sign of decline. Happiness meant fulfilling the mission of one's blessing for a lifetime, which was the will of the Creator. Then, Van thought about what he needed to do next, to change the mindset of the Zoltan people. Meanwhile, Led and the other two were playing outside, when suddenly the villagers urged them to leave because ogres had been spotted near the village. Although they hadn't entered the village, people living outside had been attacked. Upon hearing this, Led immediately took charge of the matter. After investigating, they found ogre footprints, numbering around 30, and it seemed the creatures were scouting the village. The villagers were surprised to hear this because they had never seen intelligent ogres before. Led decided he and Rizlet would go to fight them, while Ruti led everyone to a central shelter for safety. The next day, the two returned to the forest to search, and soon sensed the presence of monsters. Ogres emerged from the forest and attacked, but Led cut one down with a single strike. They were surprised at how weak the monster seemed, but something still felt off because they had never seen ogres use weapons before. Then another group of ogres appeared, skilled in both martial arts and magic, yet they still weren't a match for Led. Further investigation revealed that the weapons the ogres carried were part of an elf ruin, and their bodies bore elf script. Their situation was similar to that of the gem beasts, as they also possessed multiple blessings. Meanwhile, the church bid farewell to the hero Van. Before leaving, Mistrom reminded Esta that she had heard the hero had a guide, so she hoped Esta would not abandon the hero and guide him. Later, Esta asked Van why he did not show his usual aversion to communication today. Van replied that those children had not yet awakened their blessing and needed protection before recognizing their mission. At that moment, Lubo arrived with Tisei, who would lead them to the next destination. Lavender then recognized Tisei and accused her of spying on them before, also questioning why Zoltan's adventurers had to take odd jobs. Tisei brushed it off by saying the hot spring fees were too high. Soon after, Tisei sent a small spider to inform Led of the current situation. The new heroes team would next go to defeat the hill giants Dantak, with Tisei accompanying them as a guide. Everyone was very concerned afterward, fearing that if her hidden identity was exposed, the hero might see her as an enemy. So Ruti told the small spider to come to her if Tisei was in danger. The new hero's mind is becoming increasingly deranged. The giant was living peacefully at home but was slaughtered just because he was a fanatical believer in the Creator. All creatures that do not follow the blessing are evil, and the leisurely town of Zoltan was no exception. After returning from the giant slaying campaign, everyone planned to hold a celebration for the hero, but Van disdainfully said it was unnecessary, calling the residents of Zoltan heretics. Bishop Lubo hurriedly urged him to take back his words, but Van insisted that converting heretics was one of his important missions. He claimed their lives there were meaningless. Abandoning the divine mission was laziness, so they must repent. Their duty was to fight the demon army alongside the hero. This lazy border town had no value. Seeing the imminent conflict between Van and the people, Tisei quickly sent the small spider to summon reinforcements. When no one was willing to obey him, Van took out the shield he obtained from the salt dragons, which granted the wielder mind control magic. Mistrom and Esta tried to stop him, but were held back by Lavender. Esta hurriedly sought help from Bishop Lubo, who said it would be good for the hero to fail once, as the city's disappearance wouldn't affect his reputation anyway. Just as Van was about to cast mind control on everyone, several vines interrupted his spell. Yarandrala arrived in time to save the day, but Van broke free and attacked Yarandrala. The two wondered why Van wasn't using the healing hand. Even with an incredibly strong body, he should still feel pain. They soon realized the reason. Van's spiritual pillar was his belief in his own blessing. They decided to knock him down to deflate his arrogance. With Danon and Yarandrala working together, they successfully dealt damage to Van. However, Van used reverse healing to transfer all the damage he took to Danon. How could a hero use such a sinister skill? Van explained it was a skill that used the opponent's vitality to heal himself, allowing him to reverse even the direst of situations. Just as the two sides faced off, the salt dragons arrived with their full force. The Dragon King then spat out a breath of fire at Van, prompting Yarandrala to cast a defensive spell. However, scattered dragon breath still fell across the town, yet Van was still sneaking around. Fortunately, Danon noticed in time. Danon couldn't believe how disgusting this hero was. Not only did he not think about saving people, but he was also sneaking around. Van, however, claimed it was all the will of the gods. If the dragons destroyed the town, the people would surely follow him to fight the demon army. Furious, Danon punched at him, only to have the damage reflected back by Van's skill. Van then swung his sword at Yarandrala. Led arrived just in time to block the attack. Meanwhile, the small spider took the opportunity to snatch Van's shield. Seeing their treasure stolen, the dragons followed. Led quickly returned the shield, and the Dragon King explained it was a treasure left to them by the previous Demon King. As they left, the Dragon King warned Led to be careful of the hero. The next second, Van's attack struck Led, splitting the ground open with a single blow. Led called Van an unworthy hero, then easily took control of his weapon. A sword is useless if it cannot be wielded, and this was because Van had focused only on leveling up while neglecting sword training. Van countered that human-made sword techniques were insignificant compared to the power of blessings. It was then that Led realized the foolishness of his belief. Van asked Led what his purpose was in stalling, saying he would never tire from fighting, but Led was not willing to waste that much time. While Van's companions had not yet arrived, Led and Ruti decided to flee. However, Van did not die. With the help of his companions, he was revived. He believed this was the will of the gods, and that his encounter with Ruti must have meaning. Thus, he saw it as his duty to kill Ruti and become a true hero. After leaving Zoltan, Van relentlessly fought monsters to level up, all for the day he could take revenge on Ruti. Meanwhile, Albert informed Led that Van would be returning soon, and even threatened to kill Ruti. After discussion, the best solution was to avoid fighting and drive the hero out of Zoltan. But a plan needed to be made first. Van was the 8th prince of a certain country, raised in a monastery since childhood, which likely shaped his obsessive devotion to faith. After being recognized as a hero by the church, he traveled to slay monsters, losing many companions along the way. Normally, a hero's blessing should not allow abandoning comrades, but to Van, the growth of his blessing was more important than his companions' lives. His world seemed narrow, focused only on himself and God. According to Mistrom, Lavender had not always been as she was now, and she could summon terrifying black lightning, so avoiding battle was best to prevent collateral damage. At this point, Rizlet offered to try persuading Lavender, as she was also in love, which surprised everyone. Rizlet said that while Lavender's nature was different from humans, they could find common ground through topics of love. Finally, there was information about Bishop Lubo, who came from humble origins and rose to his position through his blessing, using it to accept bribes. Led decided to personally persuade Lubo, but since Lubo had seen Led before, he needed to disguise himself. Soon after, the new heroes team returned to Zoltan, with Albert serving as Esta's attendant. Van's mind once again flashed back to the scene where he nearly died, prompting him to immediately seek revenge against Ruti. However, Lubo told him to rest, as they would gather information about Ruti. Later, Lavender noticed Rizlet and Danon lurking downstairs. unaware that the two had lured her out for a conversation. Rizlet saw through Lavender's false elf form, knowing humans feared her true appearance. Rizlet guessed Lavender was pretending to be human because she had fallen for the hero Van. When her disguise was exposed, Lavender immediately tried to kill them, but Rizlet said she wanted to talk about love. She lied, claiming Danan was her boyfriend, and told Lavender about how she met and fell in love with Led. During the conversation, Rizlet tried to persuade them to leave by mentioning the hero's mission, but Lavender refused, saying she only listened to Van. In the end, Rizlet had no choice but to give up. Meanwhile, Bishop Lubo was betting at the racetrack and ended up losing everything. Just then, Led called out to him, claiming he had a foolproof betting method. As the race was about to begin, Yarandrala grew worried. If they bet wrong, there'd be no turning back. But Led had already arranged everything, and as expected, they won the race. Led took Lubo to a tavern, where Yarandrala was the waitress. After Lubo had his fill, he asked Led why he had been summoned. Led said the matter concerned the hero Van. The girl they were searching for was extremely dangerous and might be an ancient elf relic. Lubo didn't believe it, as in his mind all ancient elf relics were just machines. Led knew he wouldn't be easily convinced, so he took Lubo to a room where the ogre they had killed was kept. Led parted the ogre's fur, revealing ancient elf script on its skin. Led suggested this might be a biological weapon created in an elf ruin. There were ancient elf relics in the mountains of Zoltan, said to include humanoid weapons. By now, Lubo was fully convinced. Only something extraordinary could defeat Van. Led pointed out that whether Van or the ancient relics were harmed, it would be a loss for humanity. So Lubo decided to persuade Van to leave Zoltan, though he couldn't guarantee success, as Van hadn't been listening to him lately. Soon after, Esta and Albert found Led, and this scene was witnessed by Lavender in the sky. She then brought her team to Led's pharmacy. However, Led and others remained completely unfazed. Danon then showed them his arm, explaining that this was the result of his momentary carelessness, and they had now left the hero's team. Esta explained that their contact was solely for gathering intelligence. As for why they had attacked them earlier, it was entirely because Van wanted to destroy the town. Although Led and others had left the hero's team, they still wanted to protect the residents of Zoltan. However, Van claimed he was only trying to help everyone clear their confusion and live a life devoted to the blessing. But Led countered that using magic to control people's minds and sending salt dragons to attack the town was not the behavior of a true hero. As a guide, Led felt it was his duty to talk to Van properly. Van was surprised, as it was said that only a guide appointed by the gods could instruct heroes. However, Led's mission was already complete. He had trained a truly excellent hero, which was why he was now living this life. But Van couldn't accept this, thinking that completing his mission meant Led had lost his purpose in life. Yet Led insisted he was still living well. Hearing Led constantly challenge Van's beliefs, Lavender immediately silenced him. As for the appearance of the guide, Van believed it must be the will of the gods. Soon the conversation ended, and Lubo said they would discuss it again later. In the evening, Led learned at the Adventurers Guild that sirens had appeared by the sea and accepted the mission. He decided to bring Van along, hoping to change his mindset. Soon, the four of them arrived at the beach, where numerous sirens were gathered. They then picked up their weapons and charged forward. Facing these minor enemies, they easily defeated them. However, Van's lack of combat skills led to him being ambushed. Led reminded him that adjusting one's fighting style was also a way to eliminate evil. After the battle, Led asked Van if he had counted his kills. Van said there was no need to care about such things when destroying evil. But Led told him there were 45 sirens in total. He had killed 26, Van 18 and Rizlet 1. The more enemies defeated, the more important one's role in battle. Therefore, until he surpassed the guide, he wouldn't be a qualified hero. Seeing Van's faint expression of disappointment, Lavender immediately ran over to comfort him. But Led thought this kind of unconditional acceptance of a lover's flaws was unacceptable. Just as they were about to leave, Rizlet discovered siren and human footprints, guessing that some sirens had gone to the village to kidnap children and returned here. Fortunately, sirens wouldn't eat their prey immediately. After investigating, they found a nearby cave where 3 sirens were resting. They quickly dealt with the sirens. Soon after, Van found the kidnapped child, and the child's family tearfully thanked them. Back in town, Led reported the day's events to Esta. She couldn't believe Van would actually listen to Led. During their travels, they had countless opportunities to communicate, but they completely failed to change Van's mind. Meanwhile, under the night sky, Van stood by the railing, lost in thought. The hero has gone completely insane. Just before, he was rescuing people with lead. Now, he has gone completely mad, not only wanting to kill Albert, who was searching for a lost child, but also stabbing his teammate. Ever since Van started acting with lead, his behavior has become increasingly erratic. Now, he hides in his room praying every day, afraid Van might do something terrible. Esta and Lubo are now taking turns watching him. At that moment, Tisei arrived. It turned out Led had received a mission to find a missing child, but because of Van, he couldn't leave, so he asked them to handle it. Hearing this, Albert accepted the mission, as he was also an adventurer from Zoltan. Meanwhile, Lubo was completely drunk in the inn. When Esta returned, she asked about Van's situation. He said Van had heard about the missing child and left him behind, going out with Lavender. Meanwhile, Albert quickly killed the ogre in the forest. Albert introduced himself as an adventurer who had come to find her. The girl then told him that she had been saved by this wyvern. Just then, Van also arrived at the location. The moment Albert saw him, he felt an immense sense of pressure. Van insisted that they had to kill the wyvern who had lured the girl here. Seeing this, Albert quickly urged him not to act impulsively, and explained that this wyvern was not an evil monster, that like Lavender it was a friendly race. However, Van wouldn't listen at all. So Albert told the girl to run away immediately while he stayed behind to hold them off. Yet he was no match for the hero at all, and was knocked to the ground with just a single slash. Just as they were about to chase after the girl, Albert suddenly reached out and grabbed Van.
Let go, let go, let go, let go, let go, let go!
Seeing Van being beaten up by Esta, Lavender immediately released magic to kill her. Fortunately, Ruti dispersed Lavender's energy body in time. After that, everyone healed Albert's wounds, but due to the severity of the injuries, he might take some time to wake up. Ruti then suggested Van might be out of control, as the hero's impulses were extremely strong, making it nearly impossible to be driven by his own emotions. She suspected Van's mind was in chaos. Soon after, Van returned to the inn and told Lubo he was leaving Zoltan, but before that, he would kill everyone related to the girl, even if it meant destroying Zoltan. Lubo opposed this, saying such behavior was unworthy of a hero's name. However, Van stabbed him through the body. It turned out Van could no longer feel the impulses from the blessing, so he believed the blessing's final wish was to kill the girl and stop all his evil. Meanwhile, the others had gathered with the water spirit to discuss countermeasures. The water spirit revealed Lavender's identity. She was a great fairy governing destruction and power, who had become a calamity since the birth of the planet. With the development of civilization, all her peers had been eliminated, and soon she and Van would attack. The group wondered how to respond. Led said this might be the last chance for negotiation, though battle seemed inevitable. However, Van was currently filled with confusion, and perhaps his extreme ideas could be changed with their abilities. Van and Lavender soon arrived here. They had just entered the water spirit's dwelling when everyone joined forces to create a barrier there. Van immediately recognized the girl who had defeated him as the former hero Ruti, but he believed it was the will of the gods. He thought that by defeating her, he could become the true hero who would save the world. However, Led quickly saw through his reasoning, pointing out that Van was simply lost and trying to impose meaning on things because he didn't know how to handle himself. Ever since Van had been traveling with Led, he had become increasingly confused, which caused him great pain. Yet Van believed a hero couldn't afford to be lost, as it was their divine duty. But if he wanted to be a true hero, he couldn't escape the pain of confusion. Then he threw his bronze sword to Van, and the two engaged in a one-on-one duel, with the guide aiming to dispel the hero's doubts. Lavender tried to stop the challenge but was intercepted by Rizlet.
Good, because I won't stop until I unleash this rage upon you!
To help the new hero Van, who has gone mad, overcome his confusion, Led decided to challenge him to a one-on-one duel. Lavender tried to stop them, but all her attacks were blocked by Danon. On the other side, Van was completely overwhelmed in the fight. Seeing that he couldn't win, he resorted to using magic, but even that was no match for Led. Lavender revealed her true form and attempted to kill Led, but her attack was intercepted by Ruti. Then, Van unleashed his ultimate move, a massive whirlwind that swept across the battlefield, instantly breaking the barrier maintained by everyone. Led, struck by the attack, fell to his knees. Van tried to finish him off with the reverse healing hand, but his skill had no effect on Led. Seizing the opportunity, Led struck back, defeating Van in the fight. It turned out that Ruti, to protect her brother, had prepared an accessory infused with hero power in advance. The collision of hero powers canceled each other out, after which Led began giving Van a lecture. Soon after, Van woke up in a room, tied up alongside Lavender. Then, Led and Rizlet walked in. He explained the situation after the battle to the two. The awakened Van said he would no longer harm others. Then Led asked when Van's blessing had changed. Van was shocked, surprised that Led could see through this. He told Led that his original blessing was the same as Lubo's, but it suddenly changed one day. He considered it a miracle from the gods and had always wanted to dedicate himself to becoming a true hero. Led said he should learn more about human knowledge. A hero who only used violence wouldn't do. He should also listen to Esta's advice more. After the conversation, Van apologized to everyone he had hurt, and they were all surprised by his change. That night, Led was tending to the herb garden when Lavender arrived. She first expressed her dissatisfaction with Led's actions, then threw a stone at him. Led caught it and saw it was the sapphire he had been searching for. It turned out that while drinking with Rizlet, she had heard about Led's search for the sapphire. Lavender said she was still unhappy with Led, but since he had helped Van, this would be her way of thanking him. Later, after being examined by a dwarf, the sapphire was confirmed to be one of the finest, perfect for making a great wedding ring. In the evening, Led prepared a candlelit dinner and then took out the sparkling ring to propose.
My love, may I have your hand in marriage?
Soon after, everyone gathered for a celebration, offering their blessings to the couple. The sister was also happy for her brother's happiness.